Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Wednesday. It's October 7th. This will be our chart lesson for the day, and uh, all uphill for the most part today. We went sideways a little bit here. Notice that we had this real steep overnight channel, a break, and we really moved to a new high here. But during that time, we just kind of fell over into this flatter two-tier channel. This is way too steep. A good healthy trend is going to be more of a 45-degree angle like this right here. Uh, when I say this one, I'm talking about the blue one that I just clicked on right there, just so you can see that. The two-tiered channel that's working more at a 45-degree angle. This was just a move on the original channel here, but it's also part of the new channel. And that's pretty common when you get a trend day that continues, this real strong in the overnight that continues on through the day. It'll tend to flatten out, and you may see a couple of different channels like this. It's steep, less steep, and then even less steep. And then we just kind of went sideways for a little bit here on the break of this two-tiered channel, and then we moved to a new high before correcting a little bit. And again, when we move to a new high, you got another little spike in channel. This is really what this is. This is a spike up, and we go into this channel. And you get a little mini version of it here. We spike up and go into this channel. We get a break, and we actually got a break of this one and two measured legs up. Not quite a measured leg, but it's pretty close. And then we sold off. So really, for all intents and purposes, the entire day was up today. So let's back out to the 7 o'clock hour, and we will go through these trades. And there were some good trades today. Most of them were, I guess all of them are really long because we were really trending up. I don't think you want to go short right in here. Even though this is flat, you still got the bigger channel, which is this is the trend line. Until you get a break of that and a new high, you got to be really, or a confirmed trend going in the other way. You don't want to be taking any longs on a strong trend like this. So let's back out here to 7 o'clock and go through these trades. There's not a lot of them, but today was a little better than the last couple of days. So things were a little more clear. It was not the difference between today and what we have been having is we didn't have those volatile moves in both directions. And those trades are really hard to trade, especially for inexperienced traders. They're hard to trade, period. So don't take that the wrong way. But if you're an inexperienced chart reader, they're even harder to read. So if you have a hard time reading those kind of days, you're not alone. And so if you don't, I tell people anytime you don't understand what's going on, don't take a trade. Sit on the sidelines. But anyway, 7 o'clock came right up through here as we're making this swing up here. And there's actually a failed second entry short right here. Actually, no, I'll take that back. Well, you could technically there is. I would count this. The way I would count this would be a double bottom. So first entry, second entry. So I would count that as a failed second entry short. But you don't want to go short there. A good failed second entry is going to be more at a key entry point. And when I say key entry point, you'd probably want to see it back at the EMA, preferably back at this trend line, like this one right here. And we'll talk about it in a minute. So I don't see any entries here until 8:28. So you had to sit here patiently, and we didn't do much in that hour and a half right there. I mean, there's just not much going on. People are just probably kind of sitting, waiting on the open to come, see what happens. I don't know. But it got really quiet right across there. And but we take off pretty quickly. So notice what happens here, though. You make this low, and you come back and test it once. You come back and you really tested it twice here, but you didn't get a good signal bar. So you need to wait on the higher low, which comes here, and that's also a second entry. I didn't mark this one. I did mark this one. I marked it green. You could argue for this to be blue. It's right on the borderline. I'll be honest with you. I like this trade. However, you can see there's some resistance right across there, and we're having a hard time getting through it. So you got to be careful about that. We'd already broken through, so we probably cleaned out a lot of it. So when it turns down here and then turns right back up, you may want to go ahead and enter there. it's probably smarter to wait and see if you get another opportunity like right here. And you can tell the smart traders waited, and that's right at 832. And look how it took off here. The smart traders are going to wait for the right signal. A few aggressive ones might enter here early, and I'll be honest with you, I like it. I'd probably enter right here. But this is the better trade. And when it broke lower and failed and turned up, you could still go long right there, but I like going long one tick above that little small bar. It gives you a real low risk entry, and boom, off it goes. And you can get a runner on this too. That's the great thing about it. And that may have been the only trade you need today. Either one of those. You'd get a runner on either one of those. So that's a great setup. And then notice we turn down off the high side and we work back. And this is actually a second entry long. Notice your new high and you go high once and you turn down. That's a second entry long, right off the key entry point, right at the EMA, big bullish bar. It's also a failed break lower out of that support right across there. There's several reasons to like that trade, and notice it jumps off again. It doesn't go as far this time. The reason at this point you don't really know that this trend channel is here, because you probably, you might have drawn it off these lows, but there's nothing that really confirms it yet. So at this point, once we turned off of it twice more, it's pretty obvious. But I would stay with this trend until we turn down that second time up here. Or it's like a double test. We came up and tested that line once, twice, three times. It's like a double test. You don't want to go short there, though, so don't take that. That's a double test you'd probably skip. Notice it does sell off, but you just don't want to risk that. But anyway, notice the long here. We have already talked about it. Then you get a first entry short, a second entry short. So that's a failed second entry, but it's also, notice the new high, first entry, second entry. So you not only do you get a second entry long, you get a failed second entry short. And it's at the key entry point. It's off the EMA. You got a nice bullish bar. Lots of reasons to like that one. And it takes off. You actually get what looks like a failure here, a failed second entry short, but notice how it's a little ways away from the EMA and it fails and turns back down. So you don't want to be entering that one way up here, not at the high of the day. If it pulled back and it was like down in here, you might take that trade, but you don't want to be going long at the high of the day right there, because this is what happens. It turns down. Even though we're going to go higher, it turns down. We tested that trend channel line. I believe most traders, let me back out. Notice that you didn't really have anything clear here to find this off the low side, because we've actually got a little close outside. If you played it down here, this is not going to work out most likely. So it's really hard to know that that's in play until you've turned down three times. If you just draw a line there and then drag it down, you'll see that it fits. And then you'll see this a lot where you get a close outside during the overnight hours, but the trend channel still stays into play. That's not uncommon to see that happen. You get just mainly because the volume's thin and they can move the market a little easier, and sometimes it'll get a little out of whack like that. But notice the trend continues until you get a clear close outside, and I already showed you the move up. You got these two measured moves off of this green break, but you would also want to measure this one. And technically, I'd probably measure it from here too, because that's really where that leg starts. And then look for a measured leg, and you can see they're both in the same place, but we didn't make it to either one. But that's how you would probably want to look for it. So let's back out here. But anyway, then you get this little channel working down. Again, you don't really want to go short. You get a second entry short right here, bullish bar. And you don't want to go long right in here either, most likely. There's not really a setup here I like. but you got to be careful going long till we get back to the trend line. And notice you make that eye, there's first entry, and there is a second entry there, but no setup. It's unfortunate because you miss this nice little move. But if you're just patient, we get the break. We try to go lower once, and so technically that's a failed second entry short when it tries to go higher there. But I wouldn't take that one because it's too congested. But when we try to go lower again, this breaks lower and turns and goes out the other side. Just go long right there. And you can see again, the smart traders wait for the extra confirmation. It runs up and we still come back down, but it was a quick, easy scalp. Okay, had a slight interruption there, but back to the video. I think we just talked about that trade. Then we back up here again, and notice you make that low. You try to go lower once. You try to go lower twice. Now you've got a really, you could call that another double test of that low. You could actually call this a double test here, but I'd want to see it come back one more time, and you can see most of your smart traders waited on that again, and then we take off again. And that still leaves you enough room to get out here. Actually, originally I had the line even further up here, but as the day progressed, you could tell really the resistance was across here instead. So I moved it down. So at this point, you still had a lot of room to or I shouldn't say a lot more, but you had more room to the highs too. So then we just kind of get stuck in this congestion. You get a little failed break higher and turn down right off the midline and finally come back to the trend line here. And you get a little close outside. I don't know that I would call that convincing, but I would still pay attention to that. And if you get a new high, be leery of the fact that prices might correct or reverse. But we ended up, notice that you try to go short once, you try to go short twice. There's also a second entry long there. And this is right off the key entry point. The reason I made this one green is because there's not a lot of room there. I believe there's enough room to scalp out. Let me just verify that even before you get there. So the entry would be 95.50. And you got to the highs 96. So you got just enough room to get out there. But even with that, you might still take that trade because again, at that point, you would probably still have this up here and maybe even right in here. And so you can see technically it went to the original line right there. And so that gives you more than enough room, gives you a couple of extra ticks. But even with it right here, you still had room to get out. So I still made that one green just because it's close. You're going long into the highs of what looks like a range, but again, you would have had more room at that point. So just something to think about. That's where that should be, right there. Okay, and then we corrected back down, and now it's pretty obvious when we turn back down here a few more times that we're in a range here. And this gave you your lower highs as well. And then finally a market that can't go higher turns down, and there might have been some kind of news right here. This is one of those deals where it runs down real quick. I wouldn't be taking a short, and there's no long there to really trip you up, so you should have just been watching here. And then notice what happens. You run up, you try to go lower once, you try to go lower twice, it fails. I like going long there. You're probably going to run back. This is one of those failures. A lot of times you try to catch the true failure. There's no entry here though because that's too bearish, and then your higher low is too bearish. And really going long right back into the support, I'd probably want to see another attempt to go lower so you get some kind of failure or trap. And you can tell the smart traders are waiting on that. Look at it go. Boom, it rockets straight up. And what it is, all these people that got short and that exited here realize, oops, I screwed up. I messed up. I got to get back in, or I got to reverse and go the other way. And you can see that momentum burst up. That's what causes those little quick moves. And that's probably what helped contribute to this right here. Once prices couldn't get higher here, and it was obvious that there was strong resistance, and this turned down. A lot of people that were probably piling in long. This is probably all week longs. Anybody that enters in this stuff is not a very good trader. Um, most of them, and they're not probably scalping out. They're trying to find long entries. And so when it turns down, they realize, oops, I've screwed up and I got to get out of this thing. And they contribute to that quick burst down like that. And that's why suddenly once all the stops are run and there's nobody else chasing it, it runs out of steam and it goes just the other direction. And they will do this. They will let prices fail out these low ends in an uptrend sometimes to get the momentum to push it on through the other side. Notice how many times they tried to get it through there and couldn't. So finally they said, okay, we'll just stop buying and let it run down, and then we'll start buying again, and that momentum will pick up and it pushes it on through. And you can see that's exactly what happened, and you'll see that a lot. So remember that if you hadn't heard me say that before. So, but again, this is a little spiking channel, and then we had this channel working higher here. I marked this one green on the breakout here. Notice you got a new low. You tried to go lower once. You tried to go lower twice. That's a little too congested, but then you get a little breakout pullback. And this actually breaks lower and turns up and goes out the other side. You might enter on that one. It's a little bit aggressive, but you can see how many times the previous resistance held as support there. And this is a higher low. Really, it's a higher low off a double, triple bottom there too. So you can tell, though, it still wasn't real convincing because it took a few minutes. It actually came back to the trend line again before prices took off. And I don't think you want to enter here. If you weren't in here, I wouldn't enter here because I would have expected that to take on off quicker than that. Then you get two legs back here. There's a second entry right here, but it's not a good one. That bar's too bearish, but when it tries to go lower again and fails and turns up, if it breaks higher above those little 3-bar matching highs, it's probably going to burst off again, and look at it go, boom. There's even a failure up here, but that's too far away from the EMA. So, and that runs on up. We kind of go sideways before we sell off, and you get another second entry right here. We did not break lower right there. That's 2-bar matching lows, but there's a new high here, and you get the first entry, but you do correct. And when it turns back up, that looks and acts like a second entry. It's a higher low regardless, and that's really the way I trade it, as a higher low. But you could argue that it looks like a second entry, and it acts like a second entry. And that got us in the 2 o'clock hour. So we didn't reach our target here. We got close. We got within a couple of points there, 3 points maybe. But yeah, pretty good trading day. It was relatively straightforward for a change. You did have this little deal right here that kind of probably threw some people off. But if you recognize the sideways action and you draw your little channel, you shouldn't get caught off guard here. You shouldn't get caught off guard in that congestion anyway. There's only one trade I marked in there, and it really, and the only reason and it's green, so it's aggressive, but the only reason I marked is because we were still inside this trend line here, and that was still the main pattern, and the bias was still up. I mean, really, the bias was up all day, so that never really changed. But hope that was helpful. Again, pretty good trading day. If you caught this first trade here, that's really all you needed today. And if you caught this one, you may not have ridden it out once you got to the high here of this range and started working back, but there's still a nice little burst up for several points there. There's probably 8 or 9 points in that little move right there. It looks small because of the overall volume today, but that's a pretty big move. But this move right here was rather nice. So anyway, that's going to do it for today. So I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow and wrap up the week. Again, it's a pretty fast, the week's going by pretty fast here. I don't know where they're going, but I've been so busy. One other thing before I wrap up, the move to the new server, I believe some of the issues are the propagation. I believe that's the way they describe it. or pronounce it, as the new site moves over. Uh, They told me it would take 24 to 48 hours. And actually, yesterday I had no problems. I was going to the new site all day, but when I logged on this morning, it actually took me back to the old site in one of my browsers. So I opened up the other browser and it took me to the new site. And then a little bit later, I went back and it had logged me out of the old site, and I couldn't get back to the old site, so I was back to the new site on that one. So I think some of the problem is the site was still in the process of propagating to the new server address. So that might be why some of you are having a problem. However, if you are still getting sent to the old site, there's two issues that could still cause that. Your browser cache, and the other one is, believe it, I didn't know this one, but there's a DNS cache on every computer, and that your computer will cache those addresses, so it makes it quicker to get you to those sites and so forth. And sometimes those need clearing as well. And I guess based on what I'm reading is those caches build up and never go away in your DNS. So sometimes they need cleaning out. So if you get sent to the old address, you'll know because you won't see anything updated on there. But secondly, you'll see a post on the main page that says we've moved, and there's also a link there that that takes you to some instructions on how to actually dump your cache for your DNS, and also how to clear the browser on pretty much any browsers. Clear the cache on pretty much any browser. So if you're still having a problem and you get sent to the old site, go through those steps. But I'm hoping that that's pretty much based on the traffic picking back up today. It looks like most everybody's back over. And I haven't had any recent emails this afternoon saying any people couldn't get over there. But if you have a problem and you do end up at the old site, go through those instructions and see if that takes care of it for you. I hope it does, and I apologize. When they told me when we were going to move to the new server that we shouldn't see any problems and we shouldn't even notice, but that's not necessarily true. So most everybody had no issues, but as always, there's always some kind of little bug or headache or something to make my life more difficult. And a few of you really had a hard time getting over there, and it was just weird how I had no problems yesterday, but then one of my browsers, my main browser that I usually use, had a problem this morning. But it only lasted for a couple of hours, and then boom, it was gone, and I couldn't get back to the old site again myself. So I'm glad I put the post on there with instructions and all. So anyway, to make a long story short, if you're trying to get to the website and you end up at the old site, again, you'll know because the home page will say we moved. And secondly, you won't see any updated mid-morning charts or anything past Monday, I think would be the last postings of anything you would see on the site. So you'll know you're in the wrong place most likely. Just check that home page. And if that home page says we've moved, then you know you're at the wrong place. And just follow those instructions. Maybe they'll help you. But I'm hoping that the propagation has completely gone through whatever process it goes through. I'm not a very high tech when it comes to that kind of stuff. I mean, I keep up with what I have to know, and anything beyond that, I'm not that up on it. So I'm not sure. All I know is I have to change the address where the server's at, and it takes 24 to 48 hours to fully complete that process. And hopefully we're there, or will be by the end of the day today. So thanks for putting up with it, but it was well worth it. The site's lightning fast compared to what it was, and things move along pretty quickly, and there's no bottlenecks anymore, and the pages are pretty crisp and quick now. So I'm trying to keep the website as user friendly and as accessible to everybody as I can. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow and wrap up our week. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.